It's great to see you again.
Well, I'm not sure you ever saw me before, did you?
Not that I remember, but that doesn't mean that we haven't been in the same room before.
Oh yeah, you were about this big.
It's dangerous. The yoga community is dangerously small.
It is a very small community, and actually, the world is growing smaller every day. So
I know. Well,
everything.
I'm very grateful for it because I live far away in Europe and I still feel really connected to everyone back in the States. So,
So you're in Austria.
yeah, I married an Austrian. I went to graduate school in New York City, and there on the very first day of architecture school, I met a very tall Austrian. And we ended up back here, and my love of the mountains, and he has a great job here, so we're here for a few years. And I'm doing yoga, and I moved away from architecture because it's a unpleasant profession.
I saw your jewelry business. Beautiful.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, I'm doing 3D printed jewelry and some spirit jewelry. I tried to do some. I have designed some rather severe geometric jewelry that I really love. It's all 3D prototype, 3D printed. And then as a side project, I started doing some spirit jewelry for my mom and her students. And then that was what kept selling so well.
Hmm. So are you doing the actual design, and then you get somebody to do
Yeah.
the putting it together?
Yeah. So we go to Pune every year, which my husband, he brought me to Pune through Osho. He was first more into Osho, and then I kind of took the torch. And so we go to Pune every winter, and I have a wonderful jewelry workshop there that I work with
Nice.
for the yoga stuff, which is perfect because it's Pune. And then I have when I do custom pieces in Europe or in the States, then I have a more high end casting house that does it there.
Hmm.
So
Beautiful.
it's a mix of things.
Yeah. Well, whatever makes us happy.
I love the imagery behind you. It's like a wall of organization.
Yeah, I'm working on that. I got to get some flowers and make it all pretty.
Exactly, my
Right.
peonies. So tell me, Richard. I thank you very much for agreeing to speak with me. I'm
Mhm.
really pleased that we're getting to connect. And I've done some research trying to get myself prepared for our conversation. And I've read everything I could find on the internet about you. And
Hmm.
I've watched some great interviews already on YouTube um, that you did that were about your work.
Yes.
So, really, the purpose of this series, it's called the Open Source Yoga Series, and it's a set of interviews I'm doing with influencers and teachers who are mostly in yoga, but also meditation and the spirit world. And my question, having grown up with a practitioner and a teacher, I felt like I have a privileged behind the scenes look at what it's like on a very honest day to day basis to be
Hmm.
doing this work, called to this work, teaching this work, but you also have a mortgage and you have kids and you have, whatever
Right.
else craziness that goes on in our lives. You have an iPhone, you know, you're, yeah, householders in that sense. So, because I saw my mom my whole life, no matter what, get up and practice, I have a wild curiosity about how other people have dealt with that. So the questions that I'm going to ask you today are just basically about what is your practice like in a very honest, unvarnished sense, if you're willing to
Sure.
share, and then
Sure.
also, how it's evolved, what was like in the beginning, the early years, and how it's evolved. So because I think I have a sense that people who are newer to these topics, they set up a kind of dichotomy in their minds. If I don't have an hour a day to meditate, then I might as well give up now.
Hmm.
And they picture people like sitting on floating on these cushions 10 hours a day and not living in the real world,
Hmm.
which I suspect with you is not every day the case.
No, I only do 9.5 hours on the cushion.
Okay, so let's start with I'll just introduce you a little bit. I mean, Richard Miller, PhD, clinical psychologist, author, researcher, yoga scholar, spiritual teacher for 40 plus years. And you've really
Co-founder, you might say co-founder of the International Association of Yoga Therapy.
Exactly.
Let me get rid of that.
iPhone owner. And yeah, and you really influential in bringing yoga nidra to the United States, which I definitely want to get to later, and done a lot of work recently with Iraq War, Afghanistan War, PTSD, these kind of warriors.
We're also working with the homeless. I'm working with children as young as preschoolers, and we're also now getting involved with the sex trafficking, human trafficking, working with women. We're having I'm having my protocol translated into Nepali and Hindi because we're going to train 40 teachers in Nepal and India.
Oh, it's so fascinating. So, okay, so what I wanted to ask, really the first question is just where your first experience, your personal first experience with yoga nidra. Where were you? What was the kind of zeitgeist like? Where were you personally in your life? And how did it feel for you the first time you experienced this work?
Mm-hmm. So are you going to introduce me and then you're going to ask me that question?
Oh, we've already started. We're going.
Oh.
It's a very casual. It's not a formal series, so we're already recording.
So ask me the question again.
Okay, tell us about your first experience with yoga nidra and the kind of zeitgeist where you were, sort of socially, and then also personally. Where were you in your life at that moment?
Mm-hmm. Interesting. My first experience with yoga nidra was my first experience also with yoga in general. I was new to San Francisco, having moved there in 1970, and I was looking to meet people, and I wandered into a yoga class at the Integral Yoga Institute on Dolores Street in San Francisco and took a 12-week course, which I went there to meet people as well as to see what yoga was about. And the class ended up being taught in silence. So over 12 weeks, I didn't meet a soul. But I like to say at the end of the first class, I deeply met myself. Mm-hmm. The woman who was teaching the class at the end of the first class gave us what I now know was a rudimentary yoga nidra practice where she took us into our body, into our breath, into our energy body. Then she took us through different emotions and thoughts, and then into just resting as being. Mm-hmm. And in that moment, all sense of separation for me fell away. And I walked home that night feeling a sense of oneness with the universe and a deep kind of spontaneous vow came up to really inquire, what is this that just happened and what is this practice? It's like what I had been searching for my entire life as a child, as a young adult. It really brought me home to myself. So I ended up getting involved actually with a mentor who had just arrived here from the Far East. I was training in psychotherapy and I hooked up with her. She had been trained. Her mother was a yogi. She was half Chinese and half Filipino, had taught her yoga as a child. She grew up in a Buddhist community, and she had grown up in the teachings of Eric Fromm and R.D. Laing in an existential humanistic perspective. So she brought all that to my table. So right from the beginning in roughly late 1970 or so, I began integrating yoga, psychology, teachings of Buddhism, and I subsequently met a Taoist master in 1973, studied with him, wrote a book for him on the internal exercises of Taoist yoga, and really began to integrate all these teachings into my own life.
So how old were you in 1970?
22 years of age.
And
22.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Princeton, New Jersey, and went to my beginning school there through middle school, and then I went to St. George's high school in Newport, Rhode Island, and then up to New York for my college in psychology at Union College, and then out here for my master's at San Francisco State and my PhD through California Institute of Integral Studies.
So it's 1970, you're 22 years old, you're on Dolores Street, you go to this yoga nidra class. Were you already, I mean, were you a hippie? Had you tried LSD? Were you smoking pot? Were you open in this way, or were you more conservative at the time? And what was your kind of social?
I would say yes, 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 and yes.
Were you reading Ramdas? Was Ramdas
I had
already?
Experimented, in the late 60s while I was in college. I experimented with different substances. When I came to San Francisco, the wide open atmosphere in 1970. So I was experimenting with different psychedelics, different ways to open up my beingness.
Mm-hmm.
I was really, I would say, fraught with a certain inner angst. Who am I, and what is this life, and how do I navigate social relationships and life itself? So that the first forays with psychedelics, say, were interesting, but it didn't really hold my attention,
Mm-hmm.
because the experiences I would have, some very mystical and some very psychological, I saw as short-lived. And I couldn't hold the experiences that I may have opened to while I was on the psychedelic afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the yoga for me and the meditation that I started to experiment held the possibility, the promise that I could not just open into these kinds of experiences, but that they could integrate into my daily life. And that's what I began to see, that there were profound interchanges, reorganization of my whole body, mind, structure, psychology started to happen through the meditation and the yoga.
So my mom tells the story of taking her first yoga class in Austin, Texas, I think in a similar time, late 60s, and she woke up the next morning and did the 3 poses she could remember. So
Mm-hmm.
essentially, did you have a similar experience? Did you immediately start practicing on your own?
I didn't. I took those 12 weeks of classes and then I stopped.
Mm-hmm.
And through the woman that I was mentoring with, I began to open to different forms of meditation. Like I started with Yogananda's Self-Realization Fellowship and did his weekly lessons. The meditative aspect was what at first really drew me.
Mm-hmm.
Then in 1970, late 72, I actually wandered back into a Hatha yoga class with, of all people, Bikram Chowdhury when he was living in San Francisco. And his yoga grabbed me because it really opened me to the more physical aspect, where my body was very inflexible, and slowly I saw my body changing in a way that was really helpful. He subsequently invited me to teach for him when he would go on vacation in LA, so I'd come down and take over his classes. And I was teaching in his San Francisco studio. But it was the meditation that really
Mm-hmm.
grabbed me. I started sitting in the tradition of Zen Buddhism, exploring the Buddhist path. I met this Taoist master in 73, started studying very deeply with him Chinese medicine, Taoism, the Taoist yoga. And again, he was more into the meditative,
Mm-hmm.
contemplative practices. So slowly, I would say the Hatha yoga, the meditation, and my integration of psychology all started coming together.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, it forced me into an interesting crisis in around 74.
Yeah.
I was training to be a psychotherapist, sitting with people, but I was, 24 years old, 25 maybe, and sitting with people who were experiencing incredibly difficult and challenging life issues. And I started to feel that I wasn't mature enough to really do this work yet. Then on the other hand, I was really opening to the yoga and the meditation, and the idea came to open my own yoga studio. So in late 74 and 75, I transferred over to Marin County, opened Marin School of Yoga, left behind the psychology, and really dove full dive into the yoga and meditation teaching. So I had a full-on practice during the early morning. I would teach all day, and just building my own understanding. I studied the teachings of Krishnamurti from the meditative side, meta-teacher Joel Kramer, who was coming out of Krishnamurti's work. Started studying Mr. Iyengar's work, took a lot of classes, met your mother Judith along the way. In 1973, I think I had my first meeting with your mom. And then I met the teachings of TKV Desikachar and flew to India in 1980 and started studying deeply with him. Again, really diving deeply into the yoga and yoga therapy. Met my friend Larry Payne. We co-founded the International Association of Yoga Therapy, and I opened the journal. So I founded the Journal of the International Association of Yoga Therapy, because I grew up in a medical background. So I was looking at the psychology, the medical aspects, but from my own personal perspective, treading the path of what is enlightenment, what is really the teachings deeply speak to me and speak to us. Along the way, I met who is my wife in 1977, I think, somewhere around there. We ended up getting married in 81. And in 1980, when we decided to get married, it was a really funny little story. I asked her to marry me, and she said, well, let's live together. And I said, you know what? I'm done living together. Let's get married. She said, okay, I'll get married if you get a job. Because I was teaching yoga. I was living in my studio, not making a lot of money, but enough to get by. So I took a long walk in the hills, and I was walking along, and I swear to God, this voice, like God, spoke to me and said, Richard, psychotherapy. And a week later, I was back in practice, had an office, had clients, and now I started looking at, okay, how do I now integrate the teachings that I'm living in the yoga and the psychology and my marriage and the whole movement of being a householder? I was more and more fascinated in how does this integration work.
Okay, so this is fascinating. So 1970, you experience yoga nidra, you continue training, you're 22. Then by 1980, you're 32, you're getting married, and so that whole decade you were doing training and
I was studying deeply into the teachings of yoga, Taoism, Buddhism. I was reading the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita. I was deeply steeped in Advaita. I'd go into the bookstores and the Advaitic books would fall off the shelves into my hands. I built a library, as you can see part of it a little bit behind me, thousands of books, just really absorbing the teachings of Patanjali, but trying to understand them as exercises, as experiments. So when I was reading, say, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, I thought of 196 sutras, each one a little experiment of how can I get to know myself better. And because I was deeply involved in psychology and a clinical practice, I was interested in how did these teachings, how could they be even interwoven into my work with the individuals I was working with. And my mentor, Laura, really helped me integrate all these teachings and psychology into my work, both with private clients, with my yoga students and private yoga students, with myself, and with my relationships with my wife and friends.
So this is 1980, and you're in the Bay Area, which is famously
Mecca,
liberal and open to these things. But did you experience or encounter resistance from the psychotherapy community in terms of integrating these worlds?
Absolutely. This is really early on. I remember bringing a friend of mine who I met along the way, Lilias Folan, out to do a workshop, and we were going over to Berkeley, one of the most liberal places in the whole world in 1970. This is 1980, 81. And actually, no, it's 70, it's even earlier than that, maybe 78 or 79. And we're going to the workshop, and there are all these people welcoming Lilias. But as we got there, we realized the signs that they were carrying weren't welcoming signs. They were saying, "Work of the devil, send this woman home back to Cincinnati." I mean, in my classes in 1973, 4, when I was starting to teach yoga, 2 people, 3 people, 1 person, 5 people, 6 people. I mean, it's not a deeply well-attended practice. And more, what I saw happening was the longer I taught, people were coming for the exercise, but not really the deeper teaching. So I was offering classes in Hatha Yoga, Bhagavad Gita, meditation. My Hatha Yoga classes started filling 12 people, 15 people, 20 people. My meditation classes, 2 people, 1 people, 3 people, 5 people, 4 people. And that's what I've continued to see across the board over the years is the Hatha Yoga aspect of the practice has really taken off. But what I might call some of the deeper practices, the pranayama, the meditation, the self-inquiry, for many people, that's kind of laid dormant, whereas for me, that woke up very, very early.
Yeah.
I will say one more thing. In 1983, after the birth of my first child, I met who would become my deeper spiritual teacher, Jean Klein. And it was Jean who then really opened me to the fullness of what I think of as yoga and a deep awakening. That experience that I had had in 1970 to that sense of oneness, Laura helped me wake up to that on a number of occasions, but it was Jean who really helped me find that as my day-to-day understanding.
Yeah, I agree. I see that Hatha Yoga has really taken off, exploded in a way. But I'm hopeful that somehow, in the progression of the yamas, niyamas, that somehow, meditation is coming afterward, that maybe somehow there'll be a second generation or a third generation.
Well, I mean, for me, the Hatha Yoga that I was working with from the beginning when I was with Bikram really opened me to a deeper psychological understanding and opened my meditation. So I do see them as portals. There's a funny moment where I was standing in my yoga studio, and for the first time I was able to reach back and grab a hold of my foot. I was standing in Natarajasana, standing backbending pose, and I grabbed a hold of my foot. And the first thought that occurred to me was, so Richard, are you really any better for now being able to hold your foot? And I thought to myself, no, fundamentally, I'm the same creature I was 5 years before. And I realized the Hatha Yoga had opened me to a very deep understanding where it was helping me let go of things that I thought would bring me to a particular understanding. And I formulated in a way a statement that I carried for many years, which is yoga is, it works because it's designed to fail. It's designed to help us see everything that we're not and to peel it away. So in a way, what we're looking for, we keep having to let go of more and more until we find this jewel that was always here waiting for us. And the practices to me are like peeling ourselves as an onion, the Hatha Yoga, the pranayama, the meditation, and all of a sudden we come to the deepest aspect of ourself, which isn't objective. It's intangible. It's that deep sense of being.
Yeah, I really like that. I think similarly of the Hatha Yoga as a kind of, it's the sugar that helps the medicine go down, because we're so addicted to doing. So it looks like doing something. So we're familiar with doing sports or athletics or other things. Okay, I can do this yoga. And then a little bit at the end, there's some shavasana, meditation, I don't know, some breathing, whatever's happening. But that's really the medicine that we all need.
So I give the medicine then first. I give the yoga nidra.
Okay.
Then we dive if we're doing Hatha Yoga. But the whole Hatha Yoga then becomes hanging out in being that we discovered in the beginning. And then we end with the medicine again. So really, I try to give the medicine all through all the practices now from the very start to the end. So it's being all the way through.
Beautiful. Okay, so tell me, like, so you're 1980. You're newly married. You're starting a proper job.
Family.
Your wife. You're starting
job
a family.
And family.
What was your practice like? Your kind of daily practice in that stage, if you can remember.
Sure. Through the 70s, I had a daily practice. Initially, just a few minutes, like you said, your mother took the first 3 poses. When I was studying with Bikram, I would just take a few of the poses, and then slowly I built. So I had about an hour's practice a day of Hatha yoga, and I did that probably on average 3 days, 4 days a week.
Sorry to interrupt. Was it the same sequence that he teaches now?
It was the same sequence as he teaches now, which was really actually very helpful initially because it gave me a structure and a ground. And I didn't have to then think so much. I could really develop each pose because I didn't have to think of many different poses. So it really helped me open to a deep understanding of how the poses work. Then I was also having my meditation practice, and that was probably 3 to 4 mornings where I'd sit for 20 minutes or so, half an hour. Along the way in the 70s, I picked up a pranayama practice. That I realized I had to do almost every day.
Okay.
So in the late 70s, before I got married and I had my yoga studio and I was teaching primarily yoga, I had a morning meditation and a pranayama, and then probably an hour and a half. Sometimes in those days, I was really into it, 2 to 3 hours, because I had my own studio. And so during the afternoon, I'd take a long practice and really developed and honed, I would say, my art of Hatha yoga and developing a good deep practice of pranayama. When I got into...
Sorry, why pranayama every day? What was important about that?
What I came to discover is at a physical level, say with asana, you're working more with the bones and the muscles and the nerves. You can do Hatha yoga, say, every other day or every 3rd day or sometimes even every 4th day, and the body slowly will open. Sometimes, actually, if you do Hatha yoga every day, the body needs time off. It needs to rest and repair. The pranayama is very subtle, and the lungs and the nervous system, in a way, are much more fragile than the bones and the muscles. And I came to find out that while I could, say, take a forward bend or a back bend and open it slowly, carefully, but it could open, I would say, over days, weeks, months. But to really open to pranayama in the deeper ratios, that I saw right away would take me months, if not years, if I was to do it slowly. And I also saw that every time I did pranayama, it was like putting a couple of pennies in the bank. And that if I stopped for a few days, each day it was like I was withdrawing those pennies. And so I realized I had to continue a daily practice with maybe 1 day a week off to really marshal the effects that pranayama would bring. And I saw the deep impact because when I started traveling a lot and teaching, my Hatha yoga practice would often fall away, but I made sure I kept my pranayama practice because I saw that really kept my immune system, my health really strong. When I was doing and finishing my PhD, I had built up a huge bank roll, I would say, from the pranayama. And I stopped for about 1.5 years doing the pranayama as I was really working intensely on my dissertation. And my health stayed really, really strong. And also I saw with my kids, they would bring home every disease known to man from their preschool. And they get sick. My wife would get sick, but I wouldn't. But after about 1 year of not doing the pranayama, I started getting those sicknesses that my kids were bringing home. And I left the practice for about 1 year. And then I started picking it up again. And slowly I saw my immune system come back online. My kids were bringing home the same diseases, and my wife was getting sick, they were getting sick, and I started not getting sick again. So over the years, it really felt to me that while the Hatha Yoga is a powerful practice, and I continue to do it, it's the pranayama practice that really helps develop strength in the body and the immune system. And the meditation really develops the strength and resiliency of the mind and emotions.
Yeah, I love that you're kind of very fine enough with a fine-toothed comb making this distinction, because it's something I wanted to ask you. You clearly have a vast background, but from many different schools, actually. Taoism, Buddhism, Tantra, Yoga, Hatha, Pranayama. So have you ever experienced conflict between these, or
Good question.
Or under the umbrella of non-dualism, do they all play nicely together inside of you?
Right. So I had my Taoist master, and he was teaching me exercises and practices and meditations that I could do for hours on end. In my Buddhist practices, I was learning practices I could do for days on end. In my yoga, I started to realize I was being pulled in many directions. So I started looking at what is the thread that all of these hold in common. And actually, interestingly, it was the practice of Yoga Nidra, the 5 kosha model, and a map that I gleaned from the Shiva Sutras from the tantric perspective of Kashmir non-dualism that showed me a structure that I could hang any teaching that I had received over it.
Okay.
And it also occurred to me that I was starting to dig many wells. I was looking to discover water, the truth of my humanity and my beingness, self-realization. But I thought to myself one day, I got a lot of wells here going. Maybe let's dig one well. So I started asking myself, of all these practices, which ones would I really keep? And at this time, I actually was kind of struggling with this, and I was talking to different people. I actually went to see a Zen Buddhist master from Japan who had just arrived here. Somebody said, you should go talk to him. So I did, and I'll never forget, at the end, as I was walking out the door, he stopped me and he looked me in the eyes and he said, you drink a lot of tea. And closed the door on me. And I thought to myself, this guy just gave me some kind of Zen koan here.
It's perfect.
It was perfect. And sometime after that, I realized, I had an invitation to go to Taiwan to study deeper into the Chinese medicine, and I got an invitation from Jessica Char to go to India. Right at that same moment, I didn't hesitate. It was India that drew me. And so from that moment on, I started dropping away the Taoist teachings and the Buddhist teachings, using them as kind of underpinnings that informed my yoga. But I realized, what was I doing? I was studying Taoist yoga, and Buddha was a yogi before he was a Buddha. And so I realized yoga was my path. Let's dig one well.
Yeah.
So I made a commitment when I went to India and started studying with Desikachar that would be my one well. I did take my needles to India. I worked in a clinic doing acupuncture and came back, finished up my acupuncture studies, and then basically put the needles down. It became my medical background that I utilize in my practice with people.
And so what's interesting, so would you say that now Yoga Nidra is sort of the way that you braid all of those things together?
It has given me a structure, along with the Shiva Sutra map of meditation, that has allowed me to take every practice I've ever learned and put it in a way that to me is very simple, easy to follow, and has the deepest teachings embedded in it. So I have actually a map of meditation that I draw from. Interwoven in that are all the teachings of Yoga Nidra and all the practices from Hatha Yoga to Pranayama to meditation that I've ever experienced.
So may I ask, and I don't know how much you want to self-disclose, but how did you make the connection between yoga nidra and trauma survivors? Did you have that in your personal background and experience a shift, or how did you find your way to the PTSD survivors, for example?
Well, I had a particular deep-seated depression that followed me for many years. That first practice of yoga nidra started to crack open back in 1970, and subsequently helped me heal all the way through that depression. I worked for a while in a mental hospital with severely schizophrenic and psychotic patients, and I saw that these practices could have a deep healing effect. Mm-hmm. As I developed the practices of yoga nidra and basically trying to look at how do I utilize these practices so that I could take them to any audience, any population, mm-hmm. and they would receive them as if it was helping them where they were. So I made it into a very secular practice. In 2003, I think it was, 2004, I got a phone call from a woman, Robin Carnes, who had been reading and listening to some of my tapes and literature. And she had been invited to teach a yoga class at Walter Reed Army Medical Center. And she decided to teach a yoga nidra class. And sitting in on that class, Christine Gertz, who was one of the researchers at that time, noticed the possibility of this practice and its benefit it might have with returning wounded warriors from the Iraq and Afghan war. So she asked Robin if she'd be interested in doing a research study. Robin called me and basically said, I have no clue what I'm doing here. Would you teach me? So I ended up teaching her the practices, which she then taught to the soldiers, the wounded warriors, during that first research study in 2004, 5, 6. And as a result, the military, Walter Reed staff, saw the incredible impact it had, healing power. When that study started, we had a small population in the study, but they were all severely clinically diagnosed with PTSD. Mm-hmm. So the scale was 40 to 80, and 80 being the highest, and they were all up in the high 70s. Okay. By the end of the study, which was 18 practices, I think it was given over 3 weeks or so. So a very short time. They were all subclinical, except for one person who was right at the baseline of 40. Wow. And so they hired Robin right on the spot. And so any wounded warrior for the next, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years had access to my protocol of yoga nidra as part of their healing process. And then subsequent to that, we got another study at Miami VA, and then it just started to take off like wildfire because, one, there was a huge flood of trauma coming back from the war and very few means that really worked well. So the military was open to alternatives really for the very first time. And we were right there at the beginning, and we had a great impact. So now my protocol is being used in over 35 VA centers across the United States, Department of Defense, military, hospitals, and we're coming now into Canada and Australia and United Kingdom as well. It's because while it's a simple practice, it has a profound healing effect with PTSD, depression, anxiety disorders, sleep disorders, all the kinds of things, chronic pain that we would find in trauma.
Yeah, but I think the secularization is key, this idea.
It was key. And when we started the study, it was called Yoga Nidra. Mm-hmm. The military came to me when we first were proposing the study, and they said, look, we're military. We don't do yoga. We don't do yoga nidra. We don't even know what this word means. So would you get rid of it and get a new word for us? So I came up with integrative restoration. Integrative because I felt it integrated the psychology of ourselves as human beings, and restorative because it helped us restore that deep sense of being and being at home. and iRest, because in 2004 everything was iPad and iPhone, so why not iRest? So they loved that. They said, hey, we can do integrative restoration. At the end of the study, when it was so successful, they came back to me and said, look, great work. You can call it anything you want. You can call it Yoga Nidra. So we decided, let's call it Integrative Restoration iRest Yoga Nidra Meditation. Because it's a form of meditation, and most people are familiar with that, and they're not familiar with the word Yoga Nidra. But even so, we were able then to use it in the literature.
Where can people are there any resources online where people can find a taster of exactly your brand of Yoga Nidra, this iRest style?
Absolutely. On our website, iRest.us, we've got portals where we've got different practices people can taste for sample for free. The book that I just wrote, the iRest program for healing PTSD, there are 42 meditations that go with the book that are on our site people can access. A lot of my teachers, including myself, have put out now CDs, downloadable MP3s. I've got my original book on Yoga Nidra. So there's a plethora now of literature on Yoga Nidra, specifically the practices that I've designed and teach, but also many other forms of Yoga Nidra as well.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I wonder if you ever feel frustrated with because Yoga Nidra sometimes can be taught in other ways. It's a kind of simple term.
A lot of the ways that it's actually being taught is a form of deep relaxation.
Yeah.
And that is fantastic. People are so stressed, they need that.
Yeah.
Ours, I think, offers a deep healing psychologically and spiritually. I mean, the practice ultimately for me is about awakening as a human being to our fullest potential, and that's the way that I teach it. But just like we were talking earlier, some people use Hatha Yoga as their entryway. I don't care how they come. I don't care what door they come through. As long as they get here, that's the most important thing. Whether it's drugs, depression, PTSD, post-traumatic stress, Hatha Yoga, pranayama, meditation, Zen, yoga, Buddhism, Taoism, Islam, I don't care. As long as they come home to themselves. And just as an aside, when I started to study at Walter Reed and then the homeless study and different populations, two people stand out so deeply in my mind because they're representative of so many. In the first homeless study, there was a woman, when I introduced her to these basic principles of Yoga Nidra, the first practice, she came back at the end of the practice when I was asking people, so what was this like for you? She said, I feel like I just came home. She said, and she followed up, she said, you know what? Now that I know this is my real home, now I can deal with my homelessness.
That's so beautiful.
And I was in a VA site a few weeks ago teaching this practice to a group of veterans who are hospitalized for traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress. And I got the same response from a vet. At the end of the practice, he looked at me and he said, I feel like I just came home. So I realized these practices, they bring us home to the real home, which is in our heart. It's here. It's not out there. And they realize it was always here. They just had been looking in all the wrong places. And the practice really helps them ground. And from that home, now we can deal with all the different issues we have to struggle with in our life.
So powerful.
You know, you were asking me this earlier question about my own practice. When I got married, it did occur to me, I wonder, is married life and having children, is this going to get in the way of my deep inquiry of awakening and who am I? And it occurred to me along the way, if as a Westerner I can't do this in marriage and in relationship with children, then why be a Westerner and do these practices?
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, along the way, as I was teaching, I had two teachers from India, two non-dual teachers, who actually said to me very directly, if you want to realize the deepest teachings, then our advice is leave your marriage, leave your children, leave your job, and take up meditation as a full-time occupation.
Yeah.
And that didn't sit well in my throat and my stomach, and I actually thanked those two teachers and left them.
Yeah.
And I have great gratitude for the teachings they gave me. But I realized I'm a Westerner.
Yeah.
I've got children. I've got a job. I've got a mortgage and a car payment. If I can't realize these teachings in my daily life, then they're only for a very few people.
Yeah.
So I really dove in, and I had a great support from my wife. I would get up early in the morning and meditate before the children were up. If the children did get up, she'd take them for a while. I made sure that if I went traveling teaching, I traveled, I went, I came back because I wanted to be a dad. I wanted to be there for my children in the way they woke up in the morning and went to sleep at night. But I carved out time in the morning and sometimes during the afternoon or later in the evening for my own practices. And from my perspective, they have borne the fruit that I was promised from the teachings of yoga. I feel like I've realized who I am. That sense of unity that I woke up to in 1970, that's my daily understanding now. I carried it into my relationship with my kids. They learned yoga nidra from me every day, going to sleep. Actually, I asked my son when he was, 16 or so, I'm teaching a retreat. Would you like to come? He said, why, Dad? I'm with you all day long. I know what you do there. My daughter got very involved in the retreats, has taken all my retreats and trainings. But I realize it's the integration into daily life. It's a moment-to-moment practice. While even today, most mornings I sit for about 20 to 30 minutes. I have a pranayama practice. I start with 20 minutes of Hatha yoga before and then sit and do my pranayama and then my meditation. I do sit retreats at times for 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, 10 days of quiet silence, inquiry, a couple times a year. But otherwise, it's a 24-hour, 7-day a week, 365-day a year practice. It's every moment to me is the practice. Yeah, my relationship with my wife, my children, speaking to you, it's keeping that profound understanding that no separation, everything is ourself, valuing life.
Thank you, Richard. It's what my mom always says, my practice is that which is in front of me right now.
Exactly, yeah, it has to be. I mean, we're sitting in meditation, what's in front of us? Ourself. Yeah. I'm sitting here with you, what's in front of me? In a way, myself, I just see myself with a lot more hair, but it's myself. I'm always sitting with myself.
So last question, I want to be respectful of your time, and you've been so generous sharing with me, with us. So what would you say to your 30-year-old self? What do you know now, do you wish you had figured out earlier? To someone just starting, or your 20-year-old self, someone just starting on this path, what would you...
It's a wonderful question, and actually, I've done that. I've gone back to my 30-year-old, I've gone back to my 20-year-old, I've gone back to my 10-year-old, I've gone back to my 1-year-old, and I've said to all of them, look how you turn out. It's okay, you can relax. It's going to be okay. Because I know in some of those desperate moments when I felt very lost and alone, isolated, in those early years of doing yoga when nobody was doing yoga, there were some very desperate, kind of lonely moments. And I realized they were all part of the path. And so I went back to each of those people and I said, look how you turn out. It's all okay. And so I think that's a very important piece I think we all need to do to ourselves at somewhere along the line. Go back, tell ourselves when we were in those terrible moments, whisper in their ear, it's okay. We're going to make it.
Well, Richard, I want to say thank you so much
You're welcome.
It's been such a lovely darshan experience with you. Tell us just websites, where can people find more about you? How can they study with you?
www.irest.us, or they can put in Richard Miller or put in non-dual. They'll come to me one way or another. Just put in Yoga Nidra into the search engines. I'm teaching all over the world, and my teachers are coming into all over the world, United States. So from across the country, we've got about 2,000 teachers now trained. Canada, UK, we're coming into Germany, Australia, New Zealand. So it's really Japan. So it's really just blossoming beautifully. But if people want to find out, yeah, just Google Yoga Nidra or iRest. They'll come right to me.
And people can find more of these interviews from this series. I'm speaking with John Schumacher tomorrow, for example.
Fantastic.
On my website, LizzieLassiter.com.
Fantastic. Well, Lizzie, it's been wonderful hanging out with your bright eyes and beautiful heart. And
it's a crazy place, and so grateful for the magic of the internet that makes this possible.
Absolutely. So if you're ever in Marin, if I'm ever in Austria, I'll give you a ring.
Thank you, Steve Jobs. Bye. Namaste. Have a great day.
Namaste.